You'd never guess from how lyrical and effective his words sound on screen, but when Paul Frommer was asked by James Cameron to create the fictional Na'vi language for the Avatar film series, it was his first professional experience with constructing a brand new language. While Frommer did have a PhD in linguistics from the University of Southern California, and had varying levels of proficiency in an impressive number of languages, including Hebrew, Latin, German, Yiddish, Persian, and Mandarin Chinese, he'd spent most of his adult life as a strategic planner and vice president of an LA corporation, and then teaching business communication back at his alma mater, USC. But Frommer had at least been interested enough in fictional languages to construct a word problem in the Star Trek alien tongue of Klingon for a workbook in elementary linguistics he co-authored in 1998. It was that Klingon problem he sent to Cameron to apply for the job, and it clearly was impressive enough, as he got the gig, going on to create the language of the Pandora natives for Avatar and its later sequels. This practice itself is, of course, not unique to that particular franchise. It's called conlanging, for constructed language, the art of inventing a working language with planned and cohesive phonological, grammatical, and syntactical systems. There's even an entire organization, the Language Creation Society, dedicated to those who partake in the practice, and they hold a biannual International Language Creation Conference. While this organization was founded in 2007, people have obviously been engaging in the practice for a long time, for various reasons. For instance, one of the most notable examples was L.L. Zamenhof's attempts to create a new single global language in 1887, when he developed the language Esperanto. While Esperanto would never conquer the world the way Zamenhof hoped, it was at least featured as the primary language of the 1966 horror film Incubus, starring William Shatner. And of course, Shatner would go on to interact with a lot of spoken Klingon, the aforementioned fictional language that may have earned Paul Frommer his Avatar job, when it was finally developed into a working language by linguist Mark Okrand for 1984's Star Trek III: The Wrath of Khan. In fact, languages like Klingon might be the most prevalent, obvious example of conlanging to the general public, as fully realized, constructed languages have been used in a lot of commercial media. J.R.R. Tolkien himself created the Elvish language for his Lord of the Rings novels, later used in Peter Jackson's big screen adaptations. Star Wars sound designer Ben Burtt created Huttese for Return of the Jedi. Linguist David J. Peterson developed Dothraki for George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire novels and Game of Thrones television series. J.K. Rowling created Parseltongue for Harry Potter, and Despicable Me co-director Pierre Coffin created Mignonese for that film and its spin-offs. But the practice of creating a new language specifically for the screen is generally thought to have been started in 1974, when famed producers Sid and Marty Krofft hired a UCLA linguist named Victoria Fromkin to create the dialogue for a caveman-like race known as the Pakuni that would be appearing in their brand new TV family adventure series. Fromkin, who would also later go on to create the vampire language for 1998's Blade, created a 200-word vocabulary called Paku for the show. It would primarily be spoken by Philip Paley, a young gymnast and karate student who was hired to be the Pakuni caveboy Chaka. Paley would largely leave acting behind after the show, but in 2009, while he was working at a Santa Monica law firm, he admitted in an interview he still owned the Paku dictionary that was made for him during the show's run. Perhaps he brought it with him to the theater that year, to check on the linguistic accuracy in a new big-screen version of the show he had starred in during his youth. The year is 2009, and Universal Pictures are ready to resurrect a cult-favorite 70s adventure series, this time with a comedic spin, and hopefully launch their second dinosaur-focused franchise with Land of the Lost. 10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, here for another routine expedition along summer sweeps.
Oh, I was expecting more, but also that doesn't sound... Is that Chris? Is that Chris over there? That don't sound like you, buddy.
No, I apologize in advance to our listeners. I've been nursing a little bit of a cold from screaming for days and days watching the Oilers in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we had to actually push our recording a few days because of this. We're recording on Wednesday versus our usual Monday, because on Monday, the Oilers unfortunately lost the Stanley Cup in Game 7, and I'm finally out of bed, and I can speak to Trev today.
Yeah, that's why you kept your intro short, just
Yeah.
preserve that voice. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but I just want to say, Chris, I'm sorry your team didn't win. I was actually pulling for them on your behalf, since my team, the Red Wings, didn't even make the playoffs, so I was rooting for the Oilers for you. But look, getting to Game 7, giving the Panthers a hell of a run, coming back from being 3 games down, nothing to sneeze at, so still a great season, and you guys should all be proud of it.
Oh, for sure. Like, it's an amazing season, amazing to the guys. I'm very, like, I'm going to be there, first thing in the beginning of the next season and rooting as much as I did this time. So let's hope the team stays as intact as it can. But, yeah, a little deflated time in Edmonton, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's when you talk about how it wasn't the beginning of a new era for the Oilers, but this is the end of an era for us, Chris.
Nice segue. Beautiful.
I know, right? This is why they pay me the big bucks. And I shouldn't have said that because you're not getting paid anything. Never mind, I didn't say. No. But this is the end of our summer sweeps run, our dedicated look at movies based on old TV shows, which has been, I was going to say a series of highs and lows for us, but really just like kind of one high and then like a bunch of other whatever, So we'll see. We'll see how it goes out. Are we going to go out strong here, or are we going to go out with a whimper? We'll find out soon. But on that journey that you alluded to in your intro, we are going to be wrapping this all up with a look at 2009's Land of the Lost, the second Subway promoted movie in a row for us for some reason.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, but Chris, why don't you tell us, but beyond the Subway product placement, why don't you tell us a little bit more about 2009's Land of the Lost?
Sure. It is directed by Brad Silberling. He's primarily a 90s TV guy, but he did direct City of Angels, a series of unfortunate events, and Casper, the 1990s film, which I actually quite like. I grew up on Casper, and I know Trev is not a huge fan of it, but
no. I don't hate it. I just don't care,
For sure. That's fair enough. I just recently rewatched it during Halloween season last year, and I was like, oh.
I was 15 when Casper came out, so it's like it just missed me. But
that's fair.
That was actually that was his first movie, right? And that's the kind of thing, we talk about, like, directors sometimes get blank checks or whatever. I would assume, like, Casper, like, kind of everything he's done since he was able to get into the room because he directed Casper.
Totally. Yeah. This one is written by Chris Henchy, who is a Will Ferrell collaborator. He worked on The Other Guys, The Campaign. He produced Eastbound and Down, Get Hard, Daddy's Home, Holmes and Watson, Eurovision. That's a movie me and Treb are proponents for. Also co-written by Dennis McNicholas. This guy wrote Ladies' Man. Funnily enough, we talked about the Oilers just now. Tim Meadows showed up at Rogers Place during the run, and I met him. Nice guy. Pretty cool that he was rooting for us.
But you didn't tell him that Ladies' Man is a future F2F episode.
I did not want to disrespect him like that. No,
okay.
No, I did not. But he basically, Dennis McNicholas is an SNL guy. He's an SNL writer. So that's the connective tissue for this film. The budget of Land of the Lost is $100 million. Domestically, it made $49 million, and then worldwide, $68 million. So close to 69, but fell short.
Fell short of the 69 marker, and also obviously just fell short of being a hit. This was not a hit. We looked at, so last time we looked at 2008's Get Smart, and you can kind of, in a way, lump these movies together because obviously they're only a year apart. There's some, we can, like, some of the cast members from one obviously have worked with the other cast members from the other. There's some clear SNL kind of like overlap, to a certain degree. Well, not SNL, but like that comic stable, right? I guess I should say there's some clear Anchorman overlap.
Sure.
But they're both very indicative of a very particular like era in comedy, which we talked about last time with Get Smart. I'm only bringing that up now to talk about how, like, whereas Get Smart was actually a gigantic hit that didn't get a sequel, this one, it's a little bit more obvious why there's no follow-ups.
Yeah.
But hey, we've looked at financially, underwhelming movies before that were actually pretty good. So we'll see how we feel about this one. And I think, our main takeaway from Get Smart last time was kind of like, just like, that was fine, So it'll be interesting to see, because we talked a lot in the last episode about this era of comedy and how the one thing you could say about, the second half of the 2000s, really, I guess the entire 2000s, was it was an era when kind of big budget, high concept, all-star comedies were at least flourishing at the multiplex. You know, we were getting a bunch of these every year, with a lot of like these big comic stars in them. So it's kind of fun, no matter how you end up feeling about the movie. It's kind of fun to go back and like remember that era already, like because the mainstream Hollywood comedy is just kind of dead right now. So again, I think.
Well, look, I mentioned Eurovision. And that was a Will Ferrell high concept big movie that was released on Netflix that 7 people watched and then completely forgotten about. Yeah, it's just something like that movie. And people who have not seen that, I recommend go watch it, because it feels like that one should have been in the theater and played to a huge audience, and instead it was relegated to the chasm that is the Netflix algorithm. So.
I just feel like that's the thing with like comedy nowadays, right? Is like even when there is like one that it kind of feels like back at this era would have been a bigger hit and would have had more eyes on it. They're relegated to these small releases or kind of come and go, and you find yourself, if you do enjoy them, having to be a proponent for them in a way you never had to before. Like I've spent, and this is I hate to give this away but hopefully by the time we get to it, that people will forget to give away my feelings about this movie, because we're gonna do it someday. But like all the time I have to tell people about Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, because nobody knows about it, right? And that's a movie that's like, oh, it's so good, and it's like it just kind of came and went. Palm Springs, another one like that. How good was that movie that year? And that was even hurt by the whole COVID thing. But even like a pre-COVID one, I'll give this as an example. I still haven't seen this movie, and that's speaking to what I'm talking about, because everyone I know tells me you got to see Game Night. Game Night is so good. People talk about this.
I am one of those people. I scream at you about that movie.
Like this modern comedy classic I know. And guess what? I just haven't got around watching it. And that's not because I don't want to. It's just because it kind of just came and went in a way that that's what happens with comedy now, unfortunately. But Land of the Lost was from an era when people were still, very, very excited about this this group of comic stars, which we'll be talking about. But first, it had to, there had to be a basis for it. So I guess we should talk about the show.
Weirdly enough, I don't actually have much familiarity with the first incarnation of the show, which we will discuss in depth. The sequel show, or I guess the not even a sequel, it was kind of just a reboot of the show in the 90s. I have a vague memory of watching dinosaurs on Saturday morning in live action, and I'm pretty sure it was Land of the Lost. But anyway, the original show aired on Saturday mornings. From 1974 to 1976, 3 seasons aired, only 43 episodes. It was a children's adventure story. It was a family story. It was about a father, Rick, who was a park ranger, and his children, Will and Holly, getting sucked through a time warp to an alternate dimension where I guess time doesn't really matter, but it's kind of a mismatch of prehistoric time and it's just an interdimensional family adventure show.
It feels like, I think when people think of this show or remember this show, it's easy to be like, oh, they got sucked into the prehistoric time. That's not quite the case. Like you said, it's an alternate dimension where a lot of prehistoric elements were there, like dinosaurs, but also they would run into people from different time eras and even the future, because it was kind of more supposed to be this nexus that was just pulling in stuff from all different realities and time. Yeah,
it was produced by famed Sid and Marty Krofft. These guys were super influential in the 70s for making children's live action programming.
Yeah, how much, can I ask you really quickly, to you now, because I want to ask this from our age difference perspective again. How much does their name even mean to you? Was that still a thing that you picked up? Because I know they're Canadian, so maybe there was a Canadian Heritage Minute about them or something. But, was there any element? You said you were a little familiar with the Land of Lost reboot in the 90s, but did you have any perception of H.R. Puffin stuff or Sigmund the Sea Monster or any of their other stuff as a kid growing up? Is that still running at all in reruns for you? Did the name Sid Marty Krofft mean anything to you before we started talking about doing this movie?
I have always heard their names before. Those properties never really hit for me as a kid. In Canada, we had a lot of other children's programming that I watched. One specifically, especially for Canadians, will know Mr. Dress Up was a huge one for us. But the Marty Krofft, Sid and Marty Krofft stuff, I know from cultural osmosis in a weird way.
Right.
I've seen Mr. Puffin stuff, right? That's his name?
H.R. Puffin stuff.
H.R. Puffin stuff. I've seen that image from Family Guy. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. I do recognize, and especially in the research, I was like, oh, hey, I remember that when I was a kid. But nothing that really stuck with me in a meaningful way. How about you?
Yeah. Probably. So I have more familiarity than you, but again, it would have obviously been because in the '80s, some of the stuff was still getting rerun, and I think there was like a little bit of like a rediscovery of them in the '80s going into the '90s. So I mean, obviously, part of the reason that Land of the Lost reboot in '91 happened was because there were still reruns of the original that were actually doing fairly well, like in syndication and on probably stuff like Nick at Night and things like that. So there was like this kind of rediscovery of them, and primarily, and I'm sure you know this too, a lot of that rediscovery I think was from a more like an older audience who had first watched when they were younger, and we're now coming back to it and being like, oh man, this was actually all like drug references. This was all LSD culture, which they've always denied, and I kind of believe them because like the thing about Sid Marty Krofft is they were television creators, writers, producers, but they were also obviously puppeteers. And the big thing about their shows were always predicated on these like really elaborate kind of cool costumes and puppets, stop motion animation, things like that. And they talked about how they're like, well, of course we weren't high and doing drugs while doing this because you have to put a lot of work into these.
Totally.
Which I agree with, but I also think you do take a step back and you think HR puffin stuff. Okay, they knew what they were speaking to, right? They knew what the cultural moment was in the 60s and 70s, and they were trying to reach that audience. So when you watch the shows, they do feel like these kind of LSD trips. And so there's like this kind of like rediscovery later of like a more adult audience kind of watching them in a campy way of saying, oh man, this stuff is so crazy. Because most of their shows were about people. That's what HR Puffin stuff was about. That's what Land of the Lost was about. And a few of their other shows, people getting sucked into these like alternate worlds where you meet all these like crazy creatures and everything. But yeah, so I've always known their name. I think I've gone back and like seen a little bit of the stuff here and there, but I've never like done a big deep dive into like the into Puffin stuff or Land of the Lost. It's like it's kind of just more through cultural osmosis and knowing how important they are in the history of TV. But there's another person involved with the making of the show that Chris, we gotta talk about. Yeah, so the creator of the show is David Gerrold. And that might not mean anything to you right now, but in a second it will, because when I have to tell you, David Gerrold is one of the significant names in the history of Star Trek.
I fucking knew it.
Yeah, he was like he was a science fiction writer, screenwriter, novelist, and I think this was kind of his like introduction to TV. He watched the pilot of Star Trek. And just from watching the pilot on TV, he was so inspired by it that he started writing like story treatments for Star Trek and just submitting them to Gene Roddenberry. And Roddenberry liked quite a few of them, and they ended up buying some of them. And some of them were taken and just shelved. Some of them were developed in other stories. But he ultimately went on to write the episode Trouble with Tribbles, which is one of the most classic episodes. And he ends up becoming like really a recurring voice through Star Trek history. I know at some point he had kind of like a little bit of a falling out with Gene Roddenberry, but ultimately he still did. He worked through the run of Star Trek. He worked on Star Trek the Animated Series, where he wrote some episodes, including a sequel, a Tribbles episode. And then he went on to even be a writer for Star Trek The Next Generation for, I think, just like the first season or maybe the first two. And I think that's when the falling out kind of happened, and he ended up taking off. But yeah, big name in Star Trek, and that starts kind of his TV career. And then he also, I guess actually maybe didn't start it, but like he was significant in that. And then he goes on to also create Land of the Lost for Sid Marty Krofft.
Well, Sid Marty Krofft actually first approached Gene Roddenberry to actually start writing the show.
Yes.
And he liked the idea, but he was busy. And he was the one to recommend David
that
Gerrold.
makes sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting to hear that maybe they had a little bit of a falling out, but he was like still saying, hey, this is the guy for the job. So even if they had a little mini contentious relationship at some point,
that might have come along later, probably, but yeah,
because Land of the Lost took off and became this incredibly huge hit.
I think it's more like I'm gonna admit I don't know too much about this. I just remember hearing things about this. So if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's Trekkies listening who can jump in and help me out with this. But I'm gonna guess, since he was still writing for the Next Generation for a while and then left, that maybe like many people, he was like a little frustrated by Roddenberry's very particular rules about that show. And maybe he was also one of the people who was like, Roddenberry's like shouldn't be running this anymore. So I'm gonna guess that maybe that's where it comes from. But I mean, like early on, like Gerrold even wrote like a book like that was about the making of Star Trek that became like this early like Bible for Star Trek fans. So yeah, he was like one of the early like proponents and names involved with the show.
Yeah. You rattled off a few shows that the Crofts had made, right? Very energetic, focus on special effects, very silly or comedic.
Kid shows.
Kid shows. But Land of the Lost was a little off the beaten path because it was a little bit more serious than what they were used to, especially in the first season. It was very much Swiss Family Robinson meets Lost in Space. And
Yeah, I mean, I think a modern audience today would go back and watch it and be like, "What are you talking about? It's still silly." But you're only
Sure.
responding to like the camp of like the effects and everything. Like our point is, unlike the other shows, there was a real sense of danger, right? This was a family that was like torn out of time, did not know how to get their way back, and every week we're being put into, "Oh my God, are we going to get eaten by this Tyrannosaurus Rex that we've called Grumpy? Oh my God, is this like other race that we've encountered, the Sleestak, going to kill us?" You know, so there was like real like drama to this show. Yeah.
And the production took it very seriously. Like the way the special effects work too. Like there's stop motion effects and there's rear projection. I learned in a video I watched that everything was shot live, like on set. So the dinosaurs and special effects were shot on film with stop motion, while the cast was filmed using video. And Disney, like the company Disney, had to step in to help figure out like the technology to incorporate both live on set. So rather than post-compositing stuff, which there was none of on this show, I found that fascinating, that everything was done in camera. So every time you see Will or Holly or Rick looking at interacting with Grumpy the T-Rex or Dopey the Brontosaurus, it was all right there on set. And I find that pretty incredible for the time. So just a cool little factoid. But everybody on set took this very seriously, so much so that Spencer Milligan, who played Rick Marshall, recognized that this was a big hit, recognized that they were making a lot of money off of the actors and their imagery on the merchandise and iconography, that he pushed for more compensation. And Trev, you know what that means in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You get fired.
Yeah, that means that Spencer Milligan was not in the third season of Land of the Lost.
So he was replaced by, in the show, his brother, Jack, played by Ron Harper. And I bring both these names up right away because, Trev, you know, we've been doing this a long time. You've known me for a long, long, long time. Uh-huh. And, you know, probably almost immediately when we met, I started talking to you about Matrix moments.
Yeah, your Matrix obsession. Yeah,
yes,
your Matrix theory obsession. Yes,
yes, and I'm not fully on board with simulation theory. Like, I know it's kind of a dumb topic, and it is just, it's more fun for me to recognize insane coincidences. So every once in a while with this podcast, we schedule something or we talk about something, and something will happen, and me and Trev will text each other being like, what have we done? How did we anger the Matrix gods or the robots? Anyway, yesterday was the 25th, June 25th, and we were supposed to record on that day. We had to push. Spencer Milligan, I don't mean to laugh, by the way, but no. He's dead. And they released the information that he died a couple months ago on June 25th, yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, yesterday was the day the news that he had passed away in April hit all the entertainment trades. So if we had recorded when we had intended to, we would not have even known that, actually. We probably would have missed it. But the fact that we pushed it one more day, this morning I woke up, just happened to be scrolling through Twitter, I refuse to call it X, and saw somebody I follow talking about how, like, oh man, this sucks. I watched this show growing up, and I was like, oh, I can't. And it was even more crazy for me because, as you would expect, Chris, as I've done with all of these, after watching the movie, I went and watched the pilot for the original Land of the Lost. And so I just seen like this guy, Spencer Milligan, as Rick Marshall in the pilot. And so that picture popped up on Twitter. And I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. And I thought at first that he'd like passed away yesterday, which would have made it even crazier. But it's still pretty crazy that he passed away a while ago, but it didn't get announced until the day we were originally supposed to record.
And I don't even think you know this because I had sent you a video to check out. And Ron Harper died this spring as well.
Yeah.
So we're killing the Marshalls off, and I mean, I
your
really
back, Will Ferrell.
I was about to say, I hope he's okay. I wish no ill anything towards anybody, but listeners, we're powerful. We're powerful. That's kind of.
Can you like really just quickly?
Sure.
I know you said you don't remember that much, but you said you have vague memories of like the remake. It's funny because like Liz, my fiance, so we watched the movie together as we've always been doing for these, and then I told her I was like, this is like I said to her like, this is one of the shows I really don't know too much about, and she's like, man, I think I remember watching the show when I was younger. And I was like, oh, all right. So then I was like, well, I'm gonna throw on the original pilot because like my buddy's got this on his Plex server. Let's check it out, you know?
Yeah.
And so we're watching it, and she's like, this is really fun. And then it ends though, and she's like, yeah, that was really fun. And I agreed, you know, like for the show, you know, for like the campy, like I said, the campy special effects and just everything. It was like had a unique vibe to it. But then she goes in like the other room, and I pick up my phone and I just start looking at it. I was like, you know what, let me look up some other stuff about Land of Lost. And that's when I discovered, and then it came back to me, like I kind of had that vague memory, like you said. I was like, oh yeah, there was like another version in like 91. And I called her and I'm like, Liz, did you know that there was one in 91? And I put on like the opening credits for it on YouTube, and she's like, oh, she's like, that makes so much more sense. That's the one I watched when I was younger.
Yeah.
So she was like sitting there watching the whole entire pilot of the original one, going like, how old am I? I watched this thing when I was like, she was like thinking like, I know I watched the show, but this is not feeling very familiar. But it was the remake. And you said earlier about how that 91 reboot was like kind of a reboot, but it was actually, I don't know if you saw this in any research, it was meant to be a sequel. Originally, the original Will and Holly were supposed to come back in the show, and they were going to still be in the Land of the Lost, but those actors wouldn't come back. They couldn't get them back, or you know, I'm sure it's like a money thing or whatever.
Sure.
And so they just turned those characters into different people. But it was originally supposed to be like a follow up more than a reboot.
Cool.
Because it's not the Marshalls in the reboot; it's like a different family.
Oh yeah, right.
In that TV one, yeah. But I guess I wanted like, so you do think you watched a little bit of that? Because I know you know, like we were all dinosaur obsessed when we were kids, you know. So
I must have, because at that point I was 3 years old, 4 years old. Like I was a toddler. Like again, my memories are like those flash in the pan memories. You know what I mean? But like I'm if there was a live action dinosaur show broadcast on Saturday mornings on ABC, I was watching that. So like I was watching Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Did you watch that show? That was a great cartoon.
Dude, I've read the comic book, watched the show.
Oh my God.
I love Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was the best cartoon ever when I was a kid.
Can we, if we you know, you just said we have power. Let's flex that power right now. Can somebody do something with that property? Let's probably like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs needs to come back.
Okay, like Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time. That's well documented. But they've been dropping the ball with this world shit. And you know, it's almost like Jurassic Park and Jurassic World have the like the copyright to dinosaurs in film. You know, how do you not know how cool Cadillacs are?
Yeah.
And how cool dinosaurs are? And you put your hands together, and you're gonna make $1 billion.
Yeah.
Just do it, somebody, please.
Yeah, please. It's one of the most valued and utilized franchises. Like even the comic book is called Xenozoic Tales, but I think there's only like 9 or 10 issues or something. Like the creator would always take a really long time to do like a new issue, and I don't think it's ever been like wrapped up. I think like the last issue was like a cliffhanger, and he's never come back to finish it up. And then, I think it got only like 1 or 2 seasons of that cartoon. But yeah, man, come on,
awesome.
People got to jump on this.
Yeah. In this savage land, one man stands alone, Jack Tenreck, defending humanity in a world gone mad. A world where only the strong survive. A world of Cadillacs and dinosaurs.
I know both versions of Land of the Lost have like iconic theme songs and everything. So, you know, it just seems like they're definitely, for 2 generations, I'm sure there were a lot of people like us who were just like super into dinosaurs and were watching these and were really into it.
You were also into banjos.
I love banjos ever since Deliverance. Thankfully, banjos is the only thing I got really into.
You opened up a farm after that. It was so strange.
No. It's strange.
Okay, the movie. We've been talking about this in the last few episodes. In the mid 2000s, Hollywood was looking for the next thing, so they started to reboot TV shows for the big screen. So go listen to the episodes we've done. We have well documented the history lead up to this. What's more interesting is what Trev was saying before was where we were in the comedy realm, and Will Ferrell and Danny McBride, like the height right now. You know, the end of in the 2000s era. Like Will Ferrell had just made Step Brothers. Unbelievable. Semi-Pro, Blades of Glory, what else? Wedding Crashers, oh my God. And then Anchorman. Danny McBride coming off of Pineapple Express. Like, this is huge. So they want to make a comedy, which, like I said, listeners, I said the TV show was more serious, which I think we're going to get to later. But they go to these 2 guys. They say how much the show meant to them as kids, as most people have said in the making of this movie.
It was definitely one of my favorite, if not my favorite TV show, with obviously, all the dinosaurs and the Sleestaks and Chaka. Of course.
The Krofft brothers are on board as associate producers. They visit the set, yada yada. I watched a lot of behind the scenes videos like on the set, and they're there. They're talking to the camera. They're excited.
Well, the image that they released of the Sleestaks looked great.
Right. What we did was we didn't, when Brad came aboard as a director, we knew that he loved the shows growing up, and we knew he was going to keep the integrity of what we did. So they honored the show. We created it, and Brad's recreating it for us.
Tons of marketing for this. Trev mentioned Subway. Again, hilarious that we had 2 Subway movies. MapQuest hosted an online sweepstakes. I thought that was funny.
If you're MapQuest, maybe don't tie yourself to promoting a movie that's all about people getting stuck in like an alternate dimension called Land of the Lost, but what do I know?
That's great. And then Will Ferrell was on the premiere of Man vs. Wild. I remember the marketing blitz for this movie, if I'm being honest. I saw this trailer 1 million times when it was being released. So much so, I always thought it was kind of just some almost like Robert Rodriguez, Spy Kids, Shark Boy and Lava Girl type movie. You know what I mean? Like with the special effects that you see on the in the trailers and without any context. So, I mean, that's really it. They just want to hit with the TV. They want to hit with Will Ferrell, Danny McBride. People are hot right now.
It kind of went through a couple different phases in terms of my attachment, because there's some scheduling things where I wasn't going to do it and was unavailable to, and they were going to go forward because Universal really loved the script and the property, and then I lucked out that it kind of came back into a time period that I was able to do it.
The SNL guys are coming up, so Lonely Island is big. So then that's where they get
even
Jorma
like the
Taccone.
female lead in this. Like this speaks to something Hollywood will do a lot too, right? Like so
Totally.
the female lead in this is Anna Friel, who is coming right off of Pushing Daisies. So that's what So Pushing Daisies. I don't know if you watched that show, Chris, but I'm a huge fan of that show. One of the kind of the show that made Brian Fuller's name. This ABC show about with Lee Pace, where he played Ned the Pie Man, and Ned the Pie Man was somebody who had the power to, if he could touch somebody who was dead, and it would bring them back to life. And then when he touched them again, they would die again. So, and he could only do it to anyone once. And so he was kind of employed by this private eye to there would be a murder. They would go there. He would touch the dead person and be like, "Who killed you?" And then touch him again and kill them again. And the whole conceit of the show is that then he meets this woman played by Anna Friel, or doesn't meet her, she's dead, and he touches her and falls in love with her, and decides to keep her alive. But the thing is, he can never touch her again because she will die again. So that's the premise of the show. But it was like this very whimsical, colorful. Barry Sonnenfeld directed the pilot and kind of set the visual palette for it.
Cool.
Just this amazing show. One of those ones too that got canceled before its time. Unfortunately, didn't really get to have like a real ending. But it was like this instant kind of like cult sensation. Like if you like the cool people were watching Pushing Daisies. And Lee Pace and Anna Friel were Chi McBride was the other lead, but like those two in particular were like really pushed as like, oh my god, are they the next big stars? So as always happens, Hollywood says, well, let's test her out, right? Let's test her as a female lead in a movie, and you can kind of notice that after the failure of this movie, she never really gets that chance again.
No.
And again, we won't belabor this too much in the review, but it doesn't kill Will Ferrell and Danny McBride's Hollywood careers, but Anna Friel takes like a hit from it. I wonder what the difference is,
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunate, because I think I really liked Pushing Daisies. I mean, we'll talk about her performance and everyone's performance in the movie later. But yeah, it's just kind of frustrating when that happens. That it kind of really, I think this was her one shot at moving over to the next level, and ever since then, she's just kind of been supporting roles in smaller movies and kind of back to TV here and there.
Yeah.
Never really happened for her, unfortunately.
Yeah, like a working actor, very successful in her own right, but not the breakthrough I think maybe she deserved.
No, yeah.
No. I mean, you want to just get into it now?
Yeah, let's just get into it. I don't have too much more to say about the making of it.
This is Today with Matt Lauer.
We're back now with Dr. Rick Marshall, whose new book arrives in stores tomorrow. It was back in Oslo that you just startled your colleagues with this theory that takes science in a completely new direction. What exactly is that?
It boils down to two simple words.
Renewable biofuels.
Close. Time warps.
You're serious about this?
I'm deadly serious.
Stephen Hawking says this is nonsense.
You're starting to just sound like an idiot. This interview's over.
That was my guest, Dr. Rick Marshall, whose book arrives in stores tomorrow. You might want to look for it in the I'm Out of My Freaking Mind department. What, are you crazy?
I'm picking up some major tachyon hits in this area. All right, Holly. We'll start with taking some seismic readings inside the mouth of the cave.
Something's happening. This is an earthquake. Greatest earthquake ever known.
I gotta say, I did not see that coming.
Marshall, I think you should come and look at this. Do you realize what this means?
Yes. Matt Lauer can suck it. Did we go back in time and space?
Drink it in, guys. Maybe the only alternate universe you ever experienced. It's a world of monkey people.
Friends?
Smells good.
Lizard people. Mysterious creatures. And dinosaurs.
Relax.
I think I know a little something about dinosaurs. They have the brain the size of a walnut.
What is it?
It's a walnut.
He's right behind me, isn't he? I knew it. Just trying to be still. I don't think it's working.
This is kind of a wordy one, so bear with me. Ridiculed for his radical theories about time travel, the controversial quantum paleontologist Dr. Rick Marshall finds himself banished from the scientific community with both his career and reputation in tatters. On the brink of giving up, the arrival of British physicist Holly Cantrell jolts Marshall into action, since she's quite possibly the only person that believes in him. Armed with the power of his tachyonic particle amplifier, Rick, Holly, and survivalist named Will open a time warp into a parallel dimension rife with formidable adversaries, massive apex predators, and a primate named Chaka to help guide them along this land of the lost.
You said the thing. You said the thing. They do that in the movie. They say the thing in the movie, too. Chris, I know this is a first-time watch for both of us. Neither of us had much familiarity with the show, but I'll let you go first. I'm interested to hear what you thought about this one.
So I'm going to bring up a critic that is near and dear to me and you. Mm-hmm. And his name is Roger Ebert. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, I like to invoke his name. I don't say it 3 times, or else he might just, what? Like, you know, don't like that. Anyway, I'm going to give you a couple of lines from his review. I'm not going to read his review, of course, but I'm going to give you a couple of lines. Land of the Lost is a seriously deranged movie. I have moderate admiration for it. It has a gloriously preposterous premise, cheerfully fake landscapes. The movie will do anything to get to the next scene. There's deliriously fake locations, props, and special effects that are more of a deliberate choice. I guess you have to be in the mood for a goofball picture like this. And he gave it 3 out of 4 stars. And by the way, I rate things on 4 stars as well, and Trev hates it, but too bad. I am Roger Ebert. Okay. You might hate me, I don't know, but when I watched this, I was obviously in the mood for the dumbest fucking shit. And this was silly and goofy fun to me, and I recognize that it totally seems to shit on the family-friendly nature of this show that it is trying to prop up. I'm not saying this hyperbolically, so it's not exactly what I mean, but it gave me 21 Jump Street vibes in that it's taking the piss out of the property instead of just doing the property again. And I think there's something admirable to that. Do I think it was a swing and a miss on probably what they were exactly hoping for? Yes. But I can see if I was like, if I was as high as those guys were in that scene eating that crab, which I thought was so funny, I can see myself just genuinely having a good time. And I did have a pretty good time watching this. I just felt like I was in the mood for that era of Will Ferrell and Danny McBride and Jorma Taccone. Taccone, right? Not Taccone? Taccone?
Yeah, sure.
Taccone. And I recognize this is mostly just a series of bits. Probably not a great movie, but a lot of the bits worked for me. So yell at me if you must.
Well, plus you're a huge Matt Lauer fan, so you were really excited that he was bookended.
Speaking of somebody that came out of this unscathed.
Yeah. Speaking of the monsters in the movie. You know, Roger Ebert, I've been talking about this with my friends about how if you follow Roger Ebert's career, obviously it was in the early 2000s, I think it was like 2002, 2003, that he had that big health scare and had salivary gland cancer and then ended up having his jaw removed. And I always noticed, and I would talk to my friends about it, how post that, I felt like he just gave so many more movies positive reviews.
Right.
And my take was always like, well, he's just happy to be alive. He just like enjoys everything. Chris, you have no excuse. You did not just have a health scare. This movie is hot garbage. I thought this was like unbearably bad. And my thing was like, so I'm actually kind of surprised. I was actually really worried. There was like a part of me that was almost happy. Not happy. I shouldn't say that because I don't want you to get mad at me. But there was a part of me that was like, you know what? I bet if the Oilers win, Chris is just going to be so positive about everything that he's going to come in and say even this movie's good. And then I was like, oh no,
I watched this in between their wins.
And then I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh no, they lost. He's finally going to have like a dose of reality. He's going to know that the world is ugly and bad, and he'll be able to take this movie as it is. This was the kind of movie that I watched, and not knowing the show, like I said, I didn't watch the pilot until after watching the movie. But the entire time I was watching the movie, I just had this sense in my head, and it turns out I'm right. And I think even you responded to this and would agree. I just felt like it was disrespectful to like a degree,
extremely,
that I just couldn't believe, and like not in a successful way to where I think you're more trying to like be generous and point it to.
Sure.
And I'll talk about that because I think I've seen people, including Danny McBride and some of the other people involved with the movie, and other people, and like people do, the 4 or 5 people. Roger Ebert's dead now, so we don't have to count him, but you're in there, I guess, who do like the movie, make the argument that it's like a parody of the show. And I'm going to talk about why I don't think that's true. And I think if it is trying to do that, I think it entirely fails as a parody of the show, and I think it fails as a comedy. And when we talked about Get Smart last time, and I talked about how this era of comedy, sometimes you had big hits and sometimes you had total misses. This to me is like a total miss. Do I like the people involved? Sure. Am I ready to like say this movie means Brad Silberling should never direct again or whatever? No, like he's like there's an interesting visual look to it. I don't think a lot of the effects are always successful, but I think overall, and it's obviously a bummer to just have fully CGI when you're doing a movie based on a show that was more about practical effects. But hey, that's Hollywood, baby. But yeah, I just didn't think the comedy worked at all, and I'm not like I'm not like anti gross out comedy. I'm not anti-adult comedy, obviously. But I didn't get why this was the property to do that with.
Sure.
And it just felt like it was shitting on the show and the property and even the potential of what this movie could have been in a way that seemed really misguided to me. So this is going to be one of our definite disagreement episodes because I really did not enjoy my time in The Land of the Lost.
I thought you'd like at least some of these bits here and there. Like I think
the only person who has any actual steam in this occasionally is Danny McBride. I think like he hits the best in this. I actually think Anna Friel's performance is pretty good for what's being asked of her as like generic female lead. But I think Will Ferrell is like Will Ferrell to me is hit and miss in general, right? There are Will Ferrell movies I really like, and then there are Will Ferrell movies where he's just like he's also can be like really aggravating and unbearable, and you just never know which one you're getting. And I thought he was, they were asking him to just do his Will Ferrell thing in this, and I didn't think it worked. I think it makes his character unlikable, not fun. This is definitely one of those movies where there's a point like, I don't know, an hour and like 20 minutes into the movie where suddenly Will Ferrell and Anna Friel kiss and you're like, wait, what? Like there was like never any insinuation up to that moment of any kind of like romantic relationship with them.
Well, she seemed like she was a like a groupie a little bit. So I don't know if I agree with that, but
yeah, I'd be surprised to hear that anybody was actually like shipping those two and like waiting for that moment. But yeah, so I thought like Danny McBride.
You just wish the original characters kissed when she was his
and
daughter.
See, and we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about that, right? Like the idea of like why make those changes and that's like if you are a fan of the show, like. And I wasn't, but even me, like maybe on some subconscious level, I'm like, why are these two making out when they're supposed to be father and daughter?
I think people are going to be angry that I'm not blonde and I'm not 14 and I'm also not American. It's the new version of Holly.
It's different, yeah.
Your Will's slightly different too.
No, exactly the same. Totally the same, yeah.
Yeah, you're 16.
Yep, 16 years old.
And really handsome.
Yeah, so that's right on.
And maybe they're like, because like Liz pointed out that there's like a really awkward joke when they come back from like the Land of Lost or when they're about to leave. I can't remember which it is because I'm already forgetting this movie. But Will Ferrell says something to Anna Friel where he's like, "You've become a really like grown up, beautiful woman," and they just kind of like awkwardly stand there for a second. Mm-hmm. And Liz pointed out, she was like, "Well, maybe that was supposed to be like a meta joke about how like originally in the show that was like a father and daughter." And it's like, I guess maybe that's like the only explanation that made any sense, but also like gross, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, back to my original point though, like I do think Danny McBride gets a couple like good one-liners and just like the general Danny McBride thing, which actually I should say, I don't know if you were always on board with Danny McBride. I was not. It took me like a really long time to get on the Danny McBride train. He had that thing where he kind of came out of nowhere in like the like mid 2000s, and it was kind of like he was friends with David Gordon Green. And then just suddenly he made that foot fist way, and you got the sense that like all these guys like Will Ferrell and like the Owen Wilson, all them, they watched that movie and like loved it and started casting him and everything. And I just felt like he was so one note, and I was like, oh, it's just Danny McBride. He's just doing like the loutish like redneck thing, and like I was super like not into it for like a really long time. And it wasn't really until like Eastbound and Down where I felt like, okay, I get it now, you know. And then the movies, I don't think I liked him in a movie until This Is the End in 2013. And it's actually because like since then, which I think is like his high point, playing himself, right? Playing himself as an like a more like exaggerated version of exactly what I was just saying, right? Just like the annoying redneck asshole. But he's so good in that. And since then, he's kind of like really taken a back seat in like Hollywood movies, like acting wise. He's become more of like a writer, and he hasn't like, there's not been a lot of like Danny McBride centered character work like in Hollywood movies, but he's gone back to kind of doing more TV with like Vice Principals, which I also loved. Righteous Gemstones, which I haven't seen, but Liz is like a huge fan of, and I will get around to. But yeah, if I had seen this at the time, maybe he would have won me over a little bit more because I do think he's pretty good in this. But it took me a while to get into him. Were you always like on the Danny McBride train from the beginning, or no?
Yeah, I was. Yeah,
you were.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So like to not be as long-winded, I liked him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to set the context of this.
No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. No, like
I only say that to kind of point out that I'm actually kind of surprised that I would have thought I would have been more into Will Ferrell in this, but no, I think Will Ferrell is like bad in this, and I think Danny McBride is trying.
I'm actually surprised to hear that you weren't really with Danny McBride all these years.
No, like I've even like I don't think
like Tropic Thunder, all that stuff. Like when he shows up.
I mean, he's okay in that. Like I really didn't think. I'm not a huge Pineapple Express guy.
Oh my god. Really?
It's okay.
This is where our age difference changes. This is what happens here. Because the movies like Superbad, Pineapple Express, Tropic Thunder, you know.
Oh no, I love Superbad.
No, that's fine. But like I'm just saying, like that era, that's 19-year-old Chris.
Yeah,
you know,
but
and
like were you liking just like everything, you know? Because I'm like going down just his filmography, and like again, this is like indicative of like, you know, you're looking. He had like that was a run where like for 4 or 5 years, he was in like 3 or 4 movies a year, right? And it's like in 2007, he's in Hot Rod, which I love that movie, but I wouldn't say he's like a standout in it, right? Uncredited and Superbad. I don't even remember that at all, him being in it. The Heartbreak Kid, bad, right? Then next year, Drill Bit Taylor, terrible, you know? Pineapple Express, okay. Tropic Thunder, great. You know, so it's just like these were even like that's what I was saying. This is an era when you were getting a lot of comedies, but they weren't all good. Let's face it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think well. Anyway, this isn't a Pineapple Express episode, but yeah, I love that movie. Yeah. Let's
Again, you're a huge James Franco fan and defender. So.
Yeah, just like you and Kevin Spacey. I know. Okay, so the differences between the original series. Let's just get this out of the way, okay? Because we've been kind of bouncing around it. But in the show, Rick Marshall is a park ranger who gets sucked into this time warp with his younger daughter and younger son. In the movie, Rick is a paleontologist. He's not a park ranger. Holly is a research assistant that is obviously, gawking over Rick's findings and whatnot, and then becomes a love interest. Will is not his son anymore. He's a theme park owner, like one of those like piece of shit theme parks, you encounter on like Route, 99 or 66 or whatever it's called. And that's Danny McBride. Mm-hmm. So totally different dynamic. And also the weirdest thing about this, and this is where I think the disrespect comes. And I think me watching it, I didn't give a shit about the disrespect, but I thought it was funny. This is very adult oriented. There's language, there's boob mugs, there's vasectomy talk, there's sexual innuendos, there's boob grabbing, weed jokes, drug use. I can see why it would offend even the Kroffts. Like the Kroffts came out saying in like 2017 or something, like at Comic-Con, they were like, this is the worst movie ever made. And yeah, Danny McBride, he defends it here in 2012. He says, there are the purists who I always read about that are like, I can't believe you're raping my childhood. If Land of the Lost is your childhood and we're raping it, I apologize. I think the show is awesome, and I think the screenwriters Chris Henchy and Dennis McNicholas keep the mythology intact without taking it too seriously. If it was taken too seriously, it's just Jurassic Park. We've seen that movie before. This is more interesting take on that tone. Now, I don't exactly agree with what he's saying.
No, because it's not Jurassic Park.
It's not Jurassic Park.
It's a completely different concept.
No, just because it has dinosaurs doesn't make it Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. I guess I understand them not just wanting to do the show again for the big screen, but also that's something that I think me and you came positive on with Get Smart. Get Smart felt like it was very in line with the spirit of the show. Mm-hmm. And it was respectful. It didn't hit the mark all the time, but at least I can see if you were a Get Smart admirer, you would at least come away with it being like, oh, okay, that felt like the show I used to love. Or like. This one, no. No, it's not.
Yeah. And I think that's my issue with it is like, so you just mentioned how they went like the total adult comedy route, and yes, they did, and that's clear. And then I'm just watching that, and my question is, why? Like, what is that decision about? And like, all I can think is, to me, it's a crutch. It's the ultimate comedic crutch. And this is where I think there is a little bit of a disconnect between me and you, because I think you're always more forgiving of this kind of comedy. Some people stop being 16 at a certain point. Some people don't. Whatever. But
didn't you just talk to me about talking about Star Trek and comic books and Marvel and all the time? Like, you're just as adolescent as I am.
Except I don't find poop funny, there's like...
Really? Never?
Well, this is the thing. This is why I say it's a comedic crutch, because obviously anything can be funny, right? If the right people do it. But I think what we definitely see in comedy a lot, and you have to agree with this, is there's a lot of like impetus to be like, well, instead of crafting a real joke, let's just make it about like a boner or something. And it's like a very, very easy way to get like laughs from young kids. And I think, there are obviously there are people who are clever and know how to make like clever adult jokes. There's also a lot of like really, really, really bad juvenile gross out comedies. Like that's really like one of the areas of comedy where there's like the most like kind of bad movies. And I'm not putting this one down in that same, like, I wouldn't say this is like in that lower level of that, but a lot of the humor in it, like, just like to talk about like one of the early ongoing bits of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if Chaka just keeps grabbing Anna Friel's breasts? Like, no, it's not, but they just keep doing it. And it's like, to me, like, it's just, this movie feels like the kind of movie where they were like, well, if we leave it as a family, we have to actually be clever enough to think of like, how do you make a family dynamic funny? Which I think really good comedians and good comic writers could do. And instead they're like, nah, we don't have that talent. So let's just instead make them all adults, make them all foul-mouthed, and let's have them make jokes like let's do like homophobic jokes, and let's have them make a bunch of sex jokes and have it be like just really raunchy. And that just felt really lazy to me. And like you said, and definitely with not lazy, I can tell you disagree with me about that. But if not lazy, definitely not in the spirit of the show. And so that's why again there was just like this weird disconnect to me of like, why is this the property you're choosing to do that with? It just felt weird to me.
Right. And again, I agree that it's weird, but also with no relationship on my end, I can come at it from a little bit more of a outsider point of view. No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I will talk about why I don't think it works as a parody either, but that was just how I felt about, like, the gross-out comedy. It just felt like the laziest kind of gross-out comedy. Like, I wasn't laughing at any of, like, you know, the obvious, like, let's make dick and fart jokes. It just felt like the most easy version of that.
You didn't, like, laugh at when he douses himself in the hadrosaur pee?
No.
And he's, like, second splash, and he's, like, immediately made it worse? You don't laugh at anything like that?
No.
Okay. Do you laugh ever?
Did I in this movie?
What about the contentious relationship between Chaka and Rick? I thought that was great.
Lead, Chaka! Lead your master to safety! Hey! Chaka, Toma! Chaka, no! Why? You're a little asshole, Chaka!
I thought that was a bit that kept going.
No.
Yeah, you're really fun. You're really fun at parties. I'm
definitely in the minority on Land of the Lost.
No, I'm not. I'm not trying to say. I'm just like sometimes like you are a big curmudgeon. You poked at me just because. Well, you told me I don't grow up. Like I can enjoy a comedic romp that is not a fucking great, incredible Spaceballs level comedy, but I can at least say there's some. Yeah, juvenile humor is stood the test of time throughout all of history. But you're above fart jokes though, right?
No, like so that's
you're too elevated. You're too elevated up in your little ivory tower there.
Because you already brought this up, and I kind of conceded to it, and I'm glad you brought up Spaceballs because that's actually a great example. So like. You talk about this is what I mean about how it takes, I think, skilled people. Like Mel Brooks is great at juvenile humor. You know, look, one of the funniest parts in Blazing Saddles is the fart part, like with the beans, and it's because of how like ridiculous and how drawn out and how ridiculous he makes it. I love like Anchorman has like juvenile humor. Of course, I love that movie. Right? There are movies in this run. I just talked about how much I love Hot Rod. Hot Rod has a lot of juvenile humor. I was just kind of being flippant and trying to joke myself with the joke about like not growing up. But yes, juvenile humor stood the test of time, but there's also good juvenile humor and there's lazy juvenile humor. Like to me, and I know again, this is a movie, these are movies we disagree on, but to me, that's even like where my distinction is between where I love the first Deadpool and I don't like Deadpool 2 as much. Because I thought Deadpool 2, suddenly the humor felt a little lazier and it was kind of more just like, oh, we've established now that it's easy to kind of make these kind of jokes. And it just becomes like a little, they do it like as more of like a comedic crutch. Whereas I thought there was like kind of more clever joke construction in the first one. And I didn't find any of the juvenile stuff in this one funny. You asked me if I ever laughed. The thing, as I alluded to earlier, most of what my laughs in this movie came from like verbal humor from Danny McBride. He has some really good like one-liners, usually like kind of, even sometimes I think a lot of his funniest things are things he just says kind of in the background or like little observations they have him drop in because he feels like the most real character in a lot of ways. Like he's the one who's kind of reacting to like the ridiculousness of the situation a lot and in like a very funny, like his character is just like an interesting kind of that like survivalist theme park owner redneck, like it works in certain situations. But the stuff like dumping like pee on themselves and stuff, no, that never, I'm just being honest, it didn't work for me. Not that I'm not above juvenile humor in general, I'm above lazy juvenile humor, and that's how this felt to me.
I like Danny McBride, especially when he's I liked him commenting on the non-reactions of everyone. That's something that always gets me in movies when nobody's responding to like the giant T-Rex or the giant alien or whatnot, and he's commenting on it. I like that.
Maybe this speaks to like the difference in like and maybe like I don't know if this is something you did find funny, but like the part that like I laughed at, or the first thing that I think got a good laugh out of me is when Chaka is talking and he says something and they're just like chorizo tacos, chorizo tacos, okay, and they like think that's what he said, like that kind of that kind of verbal thing. They're actually, like I said, it's always Danny McBride. I thought it was funny when like Will Ferrell says something about how he's like positive that like if you just like what was he saying? How if you run in like a serpentine pattern, the T-Rex can't get you. And he tries it and is just like immediately knocked over. Mm-hmm. And then from a distance, Danny McBride yells like, aren't you sick always being wrong? And they just have Will Ferrell go like, yes, actually I am. Like that kind of stuff works for me.
Yeah.
But anytime it tried to be like, ha ha ha, PG-13 comedy, I don't know. It wasn't hitting for me. So if that's curmudgeon, fine. I just felt like I didn't get why they were doing that in this movie. It just seemed. This is my thing. Like, I guess the point I want to make is, Land of the Lost has a concept that actually could have been very funny without that. Like, that's kind of what I think was getting to me. Is I don't think you needed to rely on that like juvenile humor when you could just make a pretty fun adventure movie that has like natural comedy from the situation they're in and from the ridiculousness of the creatures and the dinosaurs. And so to have like a lot of like, I don't know, those kind of jokes just felt like, why are we bothering here? Why use this property for that?
I liked when Grumpy the T-Rex is he's in the show, he's smart. And I like that in this movie, Rick keeps calling him dumb and stupid, like kind of behind his back, and Grumpy can obviously understand him. And then he talks about how his brain is the sign of a walnut.
Yes.
And then, like the next day, something's dropped off in front of their cave, and Grumpy delivered a giant walnut.
Yes,
that's like, fucking 3 feet by 3 feet. That was like dumb humor that reminded me of something like Pop Star. Like that's a movie we both love. And an underrated, cult classic. Yeah. But that giant walnut bit was really funny to me. I liked touching the crystal, and then they sing Cher.
Ooh, it vibrates. I wouldn't touch that, all right? Do you believe in love after love? That is so dumb and childish. Do you believe in love after love?
Will you please be quiet? Dr. Marshall needs silence.
I can feel something inside me say, I really don't think you're strong enough. Yeah, I can really feel it in my forearms. Yeah, usually you have to pay for something like this. Oh, gosh. Holly, you should sit on this.
I thought that was funny. When the Allosaurus explodes, that made me laugh. Because I didn't, when they throw hydrogen at it to freeze it up, and then it just looks like it's expanding, and then it just totally explodes. And then, like I've said before, the when they're eating the crab, and they're all high on that fruit or whatever that Chaka gives them.
Chaka, I owe you an apology. Okay, I'm a guest in your land, a guest who came unannounced, uninvited, and I've treated you like a toilet. A toilet. I want to make it up to you. Because the love I feel for you, I'm not exaggerating, is 1 billion times greater than the love for mankind that Jesus felt on the cross. And you can take that to the bank.
I'm all right. I was so glad you guys squashed that.
And they decide to squash their beef, Rick and Chaka, and then Danny McBride's like, how much money would you guys need to kiss?
You're funny, Chaka.
He's hilarious.
You're funny.
His jokes are disgusting.
You're funny.
Hey, for real though? How much money would I have to pay y'all to French kiss each other?
For real?
Totally for real.
For real.
Tongue is in his monkey mouth.
Hey, if it doesn't leave the three of us, I'll do it for free right now.
It's not gonna leave here.
I'll do it right now.
Let me see it. Kiss him.
It doesn't leave the three of us?
Never. I won't tell anybody. Who am I gonna tell?
I'm gonna do it.
Come here.
What?
Come in. Get.
You guys are gross. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Oh, I changed my mind.
And then they do this like back and forth to see if they kiss. You didn't, none of this worked for you?
No.
Oh my God. All right. Anyway, I also thought it was, I liked that there was a lot of practical stuff. I know you talked about how it was a lot of CGI, which is true to a point. They shot 1 week on a green screen stage, but there was actually a lot of on location scouting and shooting.
The day that the Slee Stacks filmed, when we, the first day we saw those guys, we walked into a little class and there's like tons of them.
Yeah, and they put real men in the costumes as opposed to all being CGI. But Brad, our director, was very much, he wanted to keep the show as much as to the show as it was, and not have us all just with blue screen and orange balls, and to use big dinosaur heads and real Slee Stacks. I think that our first day of doing all the blue screen, it was like, oh my God, how are we going to do this for the next 5 months? And then you just kind of find your groove and do it like anything else.
And I thought the CGI worked. It was this age's cheesy special effects. Stop motion, yeah, that'd be great if they did stop motion, of course. We both agree there. But their special effects were just bad or good enough that I felt like it was deliberate. And I do agree with Roger Ebert there.
It's hard to tell, right? But it doesn't. I guess it doesn't ultimately matter what the intentions are in a sense, because it's hard to tell. Are the effects bad because they just are bad, or are they bad because they're like, well, we're just making Land of the Lost, right? And like that can be part of the joke. But I agree. Like I actually have no problem with the effects work in this, other than this kind of okay. So this is where I was saying how I feel like it fails as like a parody of Land of the Lost, and this is where I want to say this is where I'm going to probably sound the most negative, because this is where I think they're ultimately a little dishonest in their intentions about making this movie, because they say that they're doing like a parody of Land of the Lost, right? But almost like 95% of the jokes have nothing to do with being a parody of Land of the Lost. They're not making fun of the concept of the show. They're not even doing the obvious thing of making fun of like the look of the show, which you could have done. You could have done the stop motion. You could have had jokes about like the rear projection in camera look of it, the stop motion dinosaurs. But they're just making a CGI like dinosaur adventure movie and then putting in a bunch of unrelated jokes that are just, like I said, they're jokes about like, they're typical juvenile humor jokes that aren't connected to the concept of Land of the Lost. So that's why I don't think it works as a parody, because they're not really taking up the piss on the concept. They're just making the kind of comedy these guys always made and putting it in this show. Like that's what it felt like to me. It's like this is the typical Danny McBride, Will Ferrell movie of this era. And we have this property, let's just wedge it in. And it's like, all right, so again, you had to change them where they're not even a family anymore. You change these other characters so that you can have a romantic relationship, so that Danny McBride can make more adult jokes. But like, why is this Land of the Lost then? If you're not even like poking fun at like the visual style of it or trying to make those. And that's why I was kind of surprised they didn't go that route. I'm not surprised, but disappointed.
Yeah, like I agree. It's definitely feels like a Will Ferrell, Danny McBride joint with Land of the Lost window dressing on it. Like that's no doubt, like no argument coming here.
It's not doing what 21 Jump Street did, right? Where 21 Jump Street actually found the humor in the premise of the show and said, like, let's make that the joke. That's not what this is doing.
Yeah, this was doing something radically different. And yes, which is not exactly parody, so I get it. I guess just, like I said, the gags and sketches and feel of it worked for me on some level.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think it's great. I'm not saying it's Land of the fucking best, but it's like, it's totally adequate. Like, I understand why it failed. I understand why it disrespected the fan base. I understand why the Krofts came out being like, fucking what the hell happened there? And it's just been really completely forgotten about. I was even looking in the research. Sometimes I like to look at to see what other people are thinking about it, or if there's video reviews, or sometimes just little video essays from the fandom. But it feels like this movie was just completely left by the wayside. I understand that the TV show is a little bit of a cult classic as well. There's definitely more videos and talk about the show still, and this one feels like a blip in the history. You know what I mean? Well, $100 million blip.
I think that speaks to what I was just saying, right? Is that if you aren't, it feels like another one of those movies at a time where we were getting so many of them. You know, there's nothing to really separate this from the better versions of this, from, the Anchormans, the Step Brothers, the ones that really hit at this time. Yeah. Like even the Pineapple Expresses, which I don't hate Pineapple Express. I'm just saying of that run right there, that wasn't one of my favorites. But it's like I can see why that's a bigger deal than this one, right? There's something working there that's not working here. And like the original show has like the camp value and the creativity of the effects, and like taking itself seriously, right? The camp comes from how seriously they're taking this show that otherwise looks kind of silly, right? So even if they had made a movie in that spirit, they might have had like a better, they might have had a better success, and definitely a movie that was remembered a little bit more. But instead, they just made another one of those comedies, and it didn't hit with people. And this era where we were getting 10 of these a year, 7 of those 10 from every year are kind of forgotten about today. And this is in that stack. Yeah.
Were you, as the Star Trek guy are?
I was hoping we were going to get to this.
Did you just get a fucking raging boner listening to Spock?
It's funny because when that character came on, I definitely had this moment where I was like, what? I think I recognize that voice. I was like, I need to know. I'm pretty sure. And it was his second appearance because he only shows up twice, I think.
Yeah.
It was during the second time he shows up, this Arn, and he's and it's like this creature, this Arn, and he's talking, and I'm like, God, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I know. And then it locked into me, and I didn't want to say it, so I looked it up first to make sure. I was like, yep, okay, that's Leonard Nimoy. And then it was just like weird. I was like, okay, he only had like 2 quick scenes. Like he probably, like, Leonard Nimoy recorded that from like his bathroom, for them on the phone, like. Great Star Trek connection. Chris, I also wanted to point out that the villain of this movie is a character named Enoch. And in my research, I found that Enoch was a character from the TV show as well, debuting in an episode written by Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov on Star Trek.
Wow.
And he actually named Enoch, his original name was Enig, which was Gene spelled backwards for Gene Roddenberry.
Oh.
And David Gerald actually changed it to Enoch. Well, so maybe David Gerald already was already mad at Gene Roddenberry. But So actually, get your music ready there, Chris, because lots of Star Trek connections.
I know. One day I'm just gonna get you to hum it once for 90 minutes and just hum the music. I know you can.
I actually wouldn't be surprised because like Danny McBride has had this whole thing recently where he like co-wrote like the Halloween trilogy from David Gordon Green, and then he got involved in like the Alien series with Alien Covenant. It wouldn't shock me if suddenly like Danny McBride was announced as like a writer of a new Star Trek thing, because that is one thing I kind of like respect about him, that even though he made, like I said, at first I was like, what a one note, this guy's just always going to be like the redneck comedy guy. And he did that for a few years. And I think it's very interesting that more recently he's been like, no, I also want to do like screenwriting in like completely different avenues.
Right.
And I think he's got like a pretty cool career now, ultimately, like looking back on the whole thing when you have some more perspective.
I totally forgot he was in Alien Covenant. Wow.
Yeah.
I think most
I don't
people
like that
forgot
movie, but I remember liking his presence in it,
Yeah,
'cause it's
same.
like whenever you put like someone who feels like a regular, like, blue collar person in a movie like that, it always pops.
Totally.
Yeah.
I wish Will Ferrell had another big hit. I don't know what's going on with his thing here, because I'm looking at IMDb, as I usually do, and he's got 136 credits, which is huge. 7 upcoming, and like all 7 of these are going to be bad, right? Like it just feels in the last few years, like getting away from even Land of the Lost, like it just feels like, I mean, I guess he was in Barbie, but then he was in Spirited. What the fuck is that? That Apple TV movie or whatever.
Barbie, Lego movie, I guess, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
That's where you get like your good Will Ferrell fix nowadays, is like these kind of like more supporting roles. You don't expect him to be like, he doesn't have to carry the movie. Yeah, I was looking at that too, and like I know you and I are in the minority camp of being Anchorman 2 defenders.
Yeah, same.
But I think and as you just said, you and I also like Eurovision, which I think only 10 other people seem to have watched. But I mean, really, his last like kind of, I feel like everyone likes movie is The Other Guys, and that's 2010. Yeah. Do you think he's just one of those guys, right, who he hit so big that he really just got shoved down our throats for about 5 to 6 years there, and everyone just was like, no, we've had enough. Like he's just like never quite recovered from that. And I don't even know if now, do you really think he has the drive to try and get back to like that era? I think he's kind of happy just being like, yeah, I'll just do like these little fun parts in my friends' things and like whatever. He doesn't need to be the guy anymore, What I'm kind of surprised by, and I don't know if I want to say I respect this, but like, Eddie Murphy, Robin Williams, so many of these comedic guys, when they hit that point, they go, well, I'm going to shift over into drama. And Will Ferrell is just kind of still more like, I'm not really so much worried about drama. I'll just like do smaller parts in my friends' comedies, and I kind of that.
He tried the drama thing, like Stranger Than Fiction, like
which is still comic drama,
Yeah, but I guess he went through that. I mean, already maybe
he hasn't made like his like 1 hour photo or anything. He hasn't tried to be like a creepy bad guy, and I think it could actually work. Like that's why the only reason I would say like I respect that he's just like, I'm going to keep doing comedy, but I would be interested to see him play like a villain in like a real movie or something.
I wonder. I don't know, man. Like I know what you're saying, and I know Adam Sandler did it too, and I know that.
Yeah, because a lot of these comedy guys, when they make that move, they actually surprise you.
But this one, it does.
He's too far gone, you think?
He's too far gone. Like and he's so, like, again, 136 credits, and we all know like what a Will Ferrell movie is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I have a friend who listens to the podcast, fucking hates Will Ferrell.
Yeah. Oh no, I have to look at too.
Yeah, like it's he's a guy that you either love or you hate. Like I do love Will Ferrell. I definitely don't watch as much as I used to of the stuff he's in. But I think you're right. I think he's just too far gone. I think that's what it is.
No, it's weird. Like it's
because even the Barbie thing, like even I know many people that just hated him in Barbie and loved Barbie, but really hated his presence in it.
Oh really? That's
yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I think he's great in Barbie. But yeah, it's weird because like I agree. Like it's strange to say. Like I still consider myself a Will Ferrell fan.
Yeah. Same.
Look, I like you know what he's been doing in recent years that I think I've told you about. I'm not sure if you've ever like followed up on it, but he does like the Ron Burgundy podcast now, which is actually
is that
awesome.
Still going?
They do seasons, so yeah, like he still brings it back occasionally. Yeah,
I listened to the first season of that, and then I just kind of fell off.
It's really good. Like I mean, I just love that character. You know,
I didn't realize he still does it. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if he's. I mean, I don't know if it's still going to keep going now, but I think there's been 3 seasons. I want to say.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, like the point I was making is I'll never say I'm not a Will Ferrell fan anymore, but it's kind of weird to be a Will Ferrell fan then, but be like you and be like, I don't get excited for his movies anymore. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I like him. I'll always, I think it's weird to say you don't like him when I think it's like undeniable that he's one of he's in the top 10 SNL cast members of all time. Easy, right?
Yeah,
like,
easy.
I mean, yeah, so many great like SNL moments. And then you just can't deny, like, to me, Anchorman, probably the best comedy of the 2000s, of the aughts, I'd say.
Anchorman is just an absolute, well, I was going to say legend, and that's funny, but like it really is. Anchorman is above top tier.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
Anchorman to me is like Airplane, like, level.
Yes,
like,
totally. And again, like you said, Anchorman 2.
Yeah,
people slept on that movie. That movie was fucking hilarious.
A little too long, as a lot of these things are. But.
The I'm Blind, I send that to way too many people. And the what is it? Was it Dobby the Shark? Was that the name?
The Dobby the Shark song is amazing. The close up of the son during the song.
Yeah.
Just made me lose it in the theater. Also, Anchorman 2 does a thing that I love. One of my favorite comedic conceits. I just talked about like the bean scene in Blazing Saddles. Mm-hmm. My like favorite style of comedy is something that goes on too long.
Yeah.
And like the ridiculous overdoing of a joke. Anchorman 2 has that amazing moment where you're like, oh my God, they're just going to redo like the Anchorman battle, with the different news teams.
Yeah.
But the fact that they push it so far is just amazing. And I definitely did not go into Anchorman 2 thinking I was going to see Harrison Ford turn into a werewolf and murder people. So yeah, come on. People did sleep on that movie.
Man, the chicken of the cave.
Yeah.
And he holds out the bat wing. He just puts it back and forth.
Look, I'm even here to defend the other alternate Anchorman movie, the Wake Up Ron Burgundy. That's like in the bonus feature on the disc of the first one. Yeah, that's got some good stuff in there too.
Dude, it's so funny. It's a shame. Again, I understand Land of the Lost is lesser than. Like I'm not a stupid person.
Yeah.
No, contrary to popular belief.
I didn't mean to offend you earlier when I made the joke about not growing up. I just mean
sure.
I do think that there is a good way to do this kind of humor in a way that feels cynical and lazy, and that's how this felt to me.
And
especially mixed with this property. Like it just felt like, what are these guys doing here? Why are they doing that with this show?
I also another real quick Danny McBride bit that maybe you liked. But when Grumpy, the T-Rex, is chasing them, and then they get away from him, and they were all screaming and yelling and scared, and then Grumpy's like a mile away, and then Danny McBride just whispers, "Pussy." I thought that was funny.
Yeah, no, Danny, to me, like I said, Anna Friel is good. I remember at the time
I was going to ask you, Anna Friel, she's your girl. We haven't even really talked about her.
I mean, she's saddled with being the woman in this movie,
Sure.
And she's the butt of a lot of the jokes, right? A lot of the jokes are about like people grabbing her tits and like, and her being like, I don't know. She's just unfortunately kind of there.
Yeah.
But I say that, and I still acknowledge, I think what's a bummer, and like to me, like I said, the thing about how like the actresses and the women will often bear the brunt of a movie's failure. Mm-hmm. Is you watch this movie and there's no way I think you could say like, well, she's the one who deserves to have her career stopped by this.
Yeah.
Because she's given a nothing role, but she's just so likable and charismatic on screen. I think she still comes across really well, and she's trying. She's got like high energy in this. And I do remember, and then I thought I had a vague memory of this, and then I saw even in like the little Wikipedia summary of the movie that said like, oh, it got negative reviews, although many critics singled out Anna Friel's performance. And that's actually what I remember. I remember when the movie came out that I think, I brought up before how I used to always read like religiously Entertainment Weekly at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it was like that magazine and some other ones which would say there was like these little like write-ups in there about how like, yeah, there's nothing, you don't need to see Land of Lost, but Anna Friel is actually like pretty good in it. And like, so yeah, I think she is fine in this. I just think unfortunately she's not allowed to, it's like the movie's not letting her be as funny as the guys.
Sure.
Because that's just the way these movies did it back then, you know?
Yeah, like
and
you need a straight man, but in this case, it's always a straight woman.
Yeah, and like and like that's their thinking, right? I don't think you and I agree that you need that.
No.
I wish they had instead done like, you know, this is the guy, like I'm glad she's in it because I'm glad she got at least one Hollywood starring role. But like maybe it would have been more fun if that was like Kristen Wiig or something, you know, who could have been as funny as the guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Could have been as funny as Ghostbusters.
Yeah, well, again, you never. As I said, these movies were a crapshoot back then. You never knew. You never knew. Even the ones. That's the thing. That's what's crazy is a lot of these movies that were terrible back then still had talented casts.
I know, right?
It's just it was weird. You know, like you let them improv too much, or just like it had the wrong like comedic conceit, or just like the script wasn't as strong as it should have been from the beginning. This group, you know, this like 2000s comedy group, you know, the Will Ferrells, the Danny McBrides, the Steve Carells, the Paul Rudds, the Jason Segels, they all of them have like this like crazy mix of like, oh my god, that movie's amazing, and oh my god, that movie is, I can never watch it again.
I think it's just because there's so many of them.
Yeah,
it's like it's like everything. You got 10 movies. I mean, mostly 10 movies come out in like a few years.
That's not you. Yeah. It's funny because I'm saying that as like a different. I'm only saying that as a time period because we don't get that anymore. But obviously, that's not unique to the 2000s. We remember all the great Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd movies. We forget that they're also in a bunch of pieces of shit too.
Exactly. Yeah. For every Anchorman, there's 10 Holmes and Watsons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We don't have to watch that, right?
No.
Okay. Let's just, let's call it audible. We're not going to watch that one.
Yeah.
I refuse. Veto.
Yeah. Chris, breaking news. Not breaking news, but as we were talking, I looked it up.
Sure.
The Ron Burgundy podcast has at least 5 seasons.
My God.
In 2022, the podcast was renewed for a 5th season. So.
In 2022.
Yeah. So, but I mean, so I don't even know if there's been more since then. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely more successful than ours.
Yeah. Also more successful than this movie.
Yeah. After, I guess.
Do you see yourself revisiting this movie though? Like,
no, of course not.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. No. Yeah, no.
Well, no, I'm not going to ask that because you and I will get an even bigger fight.
No, ask me.
I was going to say on the movies that Danny McBride is involved in scale, where do you place this as compared to Halloween Ends?
What would I watch again?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough. That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know. You know what? I'll probably throw on Land of the Lost before I throw on Halloween Ends. That's for fucking damn sure.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. You fucking met New Michael or whatever the fuck that guy named.
Rowan Campbell played Corey. Yes.
Yeah, Corey. Yeah. And now you can't say anything bad about him.
I refuse to say anything bad about him because I love that character and I like that movie.
Oh my god, yeah. No, that's okay. I mean, we all have our warts, I guess. I mean, that's it. I got nothing else to say about this one.
Yeah, I wish there was like one more Star Trek connection I could bring up, but I think I've burned them all out.
There was enough. But in I guess in 2015, the Krofts talked about making a new series. I mean, that was 9 years ago at this point. I think the series is long dead.
I think one of the Krofts has passed away since then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think they're both with us anymore.
We didn't kill them, did we?
I don't think so.
Okay,
but
I hope not.
Maybe they sat down and watched this again. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. If something does come back like this, I guess it did in a weird way. What was that show? Oh, what was that show I watched? It came out after Avatar. James Cameron was a executive
like
producer.
Earth One or something, or like was it something like that? Or
It was it wasn't that, but it was a dinosaur show.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
that show, Terra Nova.
Oh,
yep. We got there. I really liked Terra Nova. That was a good show. Just one of those shows that was too expensive. And I think that's a problem with a show like Land of the Lost, where, first of all, the original show was canceled because it got too expensive. That was a big part of it. But in today's landscape, the only people burning money is Disney. And I don't know anymore. Like this show, is it too expensive to make? Like, even if they had some inkling that there was interest, it just seems like there's too much going on.
It's strange because I'm glad we got around to this, because I did want to start to kind of end on this, because you and I sometimes we remember to talk about whether we'd want a sequel, and obviously I don't even
me neither. And by the way,
yeah.
no, I don't either. I get it. Yeah.
But we've gone this long, we haven't talked about we talked about the basic concept, but we haven't talked about like the conflict of the movie, in terms of like the slee stacks and everything, and the Altrusians, and like the war between these two races. Yeah. And I will say, like, I thought the slee stacks are really cool looking, right? Both in the original show and in this. Same. And like, I find this world interesting. And when I went back and watched the pilot of the show, I think I said the exact same thing for Get Smart, and it's just kind of amazing how economical these things were. I was surprised at how much of the stuff in the movie was set up in the pilot of the show. The pilot of the show is them meeting Chaka, and actually the scene where they meet Chaka is really kind of similar. He's not getting beat up by his like family, but he gets injured because him and his family get attacked by Grumpy, and they have to save Chaka, and he gets separated from his parents, and they kind of take him in. But the pilot has them already finding one of those like the pyramids, like the vibrating pyramid thing. They find one of those in the pilot. So a lot of the stuff is like in that first episode. But yeah, so like my point is, like, I think the slee stacks are really cool as like a visual. I think they're like a neat villain. I think this world, this idea, and I know as they said, as the show went on, they met like a pilot from like World War II who'd been sucked in this world, and then someone from the future, and it's like, this is actually pretty cool. Maybe that's the other thing where I'm getting mad that the show or the movie was just like, haha, whatever, like, we have this great world, but let's just make a Will Ferrell, Danny McBride comedy.
Totally.
Because I actually do think this is a property worth revisiting. And you were just talking about how like Disney's the only company who wants to throw money at stuff, and I agree with that. But I feel like Universal should kind of think about this property again, because if this hit, like, you could have, like, Universal just announced this whole like new theme park where it's going to have these different worlds. Obviously, I'm very excited about that Universal Monsters world.
Yeah.
But you're telling me Land of the Lost couldn't be like a cool theme park attraction if you really got this thing going again and got some like, some traction with it, make a more serious version or a funny version that's just not this kind of funny,
Yeah.
I'm down for more Land of the Lost, actually. After this movie didn't kill my enthusiasm for the idea of this concept. I just don't think this is the right approach to take, where it wasn't funny enough to pull in like the comedy fans, and then you really probably just pissed off the people who are really into the show. So.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what your intro always says. This is just a huge misstep. Doomed from the inception of making it a profanity-laden adult comedy. And if you want to get people into a theme park with their families and their kids, maybe it's not with boob mugs.
No.
So,
but like in a TV land, like, look, it's even there in the title. You and I are huge fans of Lost, right?
Yeah.
Why not do like a Disney Plus, like kind of more prestige version of this as a series? Land of Lost, where like not just one family of 3, but like 10 people get pulled into this world. You have this like kind of big ensemble cast, and then they're trying to figure out how to get out. Like, I would watch that. So, yeah. I think there's potential here.
I agree, but I really do think Jurassic Park just owns dinosaurs right now, and that 65 movie failed, so people are scared to make dinosaur movies unless you have Jurassic in the title. I really do. If I was to bet money if I was a fly on the wall in these studio executive offices, somebody brings up a dinosaur related property or whatnot, the first question is, well, we got to merge it. We got to make a Jurassic movie, or save that idea for the next Jurassic World,
Especially since this is Universal, who already has Jurassic
Totally.
World, right? So-
Exactly. Like they're kind of fucked.
But look, if the next Jurassic trilogy is just all about these giant locusts, then maybe
Oh my God.
they
Oh
can,
my God, don't get me started.
maybe Land of the Lost can reclaim dinosaurs.
You never watched it, did you?
I still haven't seen the second one, man. I wasn't into the world enough to even go on. Yeah.
This is going to be controversial, but Fallen Kingdom is a very guilty pleasure of mine.
Mhm.
I quite enjoy it. For
Yeah,
a lot
but
of
I remember even at the time you being like, "Yeah, I know it's not good. I just think it's fun."
Yeah, it's like a fun schlock fest in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. And what's his nuts? Oh my God, the director who made the snow movie.
Boyana or whatever. Like
J.A. Bayona. Yeah.
Bayona, yeah.
He's a great filmmaker. So, anyways, Dominion.
Yeah.
Please, can you just please watch it for me? You watch so much junk already. Just throw that on, even if it's in the background. I just need you to witness how much Sam Neill and Laura Dern sleepwalk through that movie.
See, that's why it's like
It is shocking.
It's like, I know you're right that I watch a lot of bullshit, and it's funny because like that's why like when you said earlier that I might like I didn't mean to offend you because like I can't. Who am I to talk? Like look at the crap I watch, you know?
Yeah.
But like that's all stuff where I like going in and being like, yeah, this is probably bad, but whatever, right? That might be kind of fun.
Sure.
I'm like, my thing with like. What's it called? Dominion? Is that what it's
Dominion,
called?
Dominion, yeah.
My thing with Dominion is like I'm like worried that like not only is it gonna be bad, but like it's gonna bum me out to see the characters I love, you know, like treated that way. Like I'm just like I don't know. Like if I never watch it, I can pretend that never happened.
But again, how do you think I feel?
Yeah,
you know?
I know.
Like I felt very. You know how people felt with Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi?
Yeah.
That's how I felt with Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler. I was just like, what? Why is Alan Grant a total fucking idiot? Please watch it.
We'll see. Maybe someday.
Okay. Come on, for the Trevorrow heads out there, you gotta watch.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Do
We
you
don't want
think
the
that guy-
Trevorrow heads coming after us.
Oh, the Colin Trevorrow heads. Is he gonna make a movie ever again?
I don't know. Like he would have to fall back on doing something like Safety Not Guaranteed, right? He has to just have to go back and do like a small little thing again.
Watch
but
this.
not Book of Henry. But
No. Oh God. He's gonna be announced of making Land of the Lost.
well, like is well, okay, he did make one more. I was about to say, is Brad Silberling gonna make a movie again? But this did get him a hit for a while. But he came back in 2017 with a movie I've definitely heard of called An Ordinary Man, starring Ben Kingsley. Filmed in Belgrade, Serbia. Oh, it must be good.
A tax credit if I've ever heard one. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, from Saban Films, yes. No budget or box office information on Wikipedia, with a Rotten Tomato rating of 41 based on 22 reviews. Yes, this is a real movie.
That sounds like a F2 I can't even say our name of our movie. Or our podcast. Jesus, my voice. Sorry, guys. Anyways. Okay, let's wrap it up. I need to make a tea. Next episode, guys. 100 episodes.
I know.
In the main feed of the main show. Unreal. Did you ever think when you approached me for this, all those years ago, when I was a younger man, did you ever think...
I was still old man.
Yeah, you were elderly.
Yeah.
And you called me up on your rotary phone and you said, Chris, I have this idea for a podcast. Did you think, truly, do you think we'd make it to 100 episodes?
Well, here's where I'll be honest. I think in my head, because I forgot how time works, that I thought 100 episodes for sure. I didn't realize it would take us this long to get to 100 episodes.
You're in your own time warp.
Yeah. And then I think what it really gets to you is when you think like 100 and then you go and look at our list of movies and you're like, oh my God, we haven't fucking made a dent on this thing.
And they keep churning more out.
And I keep hopping in more and so.
Well, anyway, for the 100th episode, it's going to be more of a retrospective. It's more of us shooting the shit and talking about stuff we love, stuff we didn't, giving a little bit of awards out to, repeat actors or actresses or directors.
Yeah.
But just
what movies did we actually like? Which did we especially hate? What did we think were the best performances? Things like that. Yeah.
So less structured like we usually do, but more just kind of embracing the last few years and just having a fun time with two friends. So if you want to join in, follow us at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. and then just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. Not a tribe of the Pakuni. Is that the ape?
The Pakunis, Chaka's tribe. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're not Pakunis over here.
Not to be confused with the Sleestacks or the Altrusians.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. I gotta get out of here.
Well, I hope you guys had a great time, and I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope I was a good tour guide. And if you'd like to learn more about acting, you can contact me personally at my MySpace page, Danny McBride, the actor and instructor. Take care.